Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice big 12-game Major League Baseball slate similar to yesterday. We have a big slate here. We got a lot of interesting plays today. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Just like yesterday, pitching is a little bit rough today, but we do have some decent situations. We do have some weather issues that could be an issue today, so do keep an eye on MLB weather on Twitter and stuff to make sure you can get the latest information about that. I do think all the games will play today, but there's a couple of concerns. So let's go and get our pitchers here. We're going to start with Pablo Lopez. He's had 2 bad games since the start of June, and most of them been over 20 fantasy points. He has a lot of quality starts that stretches as well, and he tends to limit the earned runs. And he has a decent but not great K rate. He's been a bit overpriced since he's likely a bit pricey here, but he is able to fit in a 20 to 25 fantasy point game range. I think he's viable on the slate, though he's a little bit expensive for what you could get today. Then we'll look at George Kirby for Seattle. Now, he's been inconsistent, but this matchup is very good for him, and he's got as much upside as anybody on the slate. He has 30 fantasy point potential. Oakland has had some good games lately, but he is in a good spot here, though he has been inconsistent throughout the season. Justin Steele is in play here. I think a 15 to 25 fantasy point game is doable here, though he does need to get the W to get the higher end of that range. And he is a little bit pricey due to the fact he's giving up some earned runs in most games, but his K rate should be able to offset some of that. So he definitely has some utility here. He's had a good earned run average on the season as well. Then we'll look at Charlie Morton for Atlanta. Now he's got a high risk, high reward here because he is playing in Colorado, which tends to be a huge advantage to bats. Though he's had 10 strikeouts in 2 straight games, he is capable of a solid game here, and he's got 19 fantasy points versus Colorado earlier this year. His K rate has been wonky this year as he's had some games where he's been over 10 and then he's had some games under 3. So he's just been inconsistent from that perspective. But he is a viable option on this slate, though he is very risky. Then we'll look at Seth Lugo and his upside and is in the mid to late 20s. He's had good potential against St. Louis, and he has limited the earned runs really well, even in an inconsistent K rate. He does have some upside in this matchup, especially at this price point. I think he's a great option on the slate, though he does carry a little bit of risk due to the fact that he has a very low floor. Then we'll look at Kramer for Baltimore. Now he's been up and down throughout the season, but he's got a good matchup here against the Chicago White Sox. His floor is very low, but his potential is good. He's also facing a team that struggles throughout the season. He has some nice upside today and is a high risk, high reward option with a low K rate on the last few games. Then we're going to look at Reagans for Kansas City. Now he is a Hail Mary play. I do like some Pittsburgh bats today, but if he can get to 10 strikeouts, which he's capable of, which he's done 3 times in the last 6 starts, he'll have some potential to have a good game here. He is high risk, high reward, though his floor is almost non-existent, but his ceiling is actually pretty good as he's had some 30 fantasy point games. And his earned run average isn't bad, but Pittsburgh is kind of a sneaky team on this particular slate. But as you can see, he's had some big games as of late, and he's nice and cheap, so he's a good Hail Mary play on this slate. Maybe our catchers here. We're going to start with Mr. Sean Murphy. Sorry, for Atlanta. Now he's obviously the most expensive guy, but he is, playing in Colorado. Atlanta scored 14 runs yesterday. I look for them to have a similar game today. He also had 3 hits yesterday as well. He didn't even hit a home run and scored 21 fantasy points. He's a good play on the slate, though he's just super expensive and he does need to, have a similar game to pay off. Will Smith has been a little bit inconsistent recently, but he is a viable option as he does have the home run potential for this slate, and he definitely draws good metrics for it. I do think Murphy's a better, safer play than Will Smith is, but he's in play on this one. And then Mitch Garver for Texas is a good value play. He's been somewhat inconsistent recently in the batting average department, but he's still got 4 home runs over the last 10 games. And if he can throw up a home run, which he's definitely capable of today, he'll be somebody that's worth a look as he has nice upside on this particular slate. Maybe in the first base, we're going to start with Matt Olson. Obviously, Atlanta is a very popular team. He also scored 14 fantasy points yesterday, and he didn't even hit a home run. He had a triple, though, and that paid off for him. He has really good upside in this one. He hasn't had but 1 home run over the last 10 games, but he is capable of it today, especially in Colorado, and he's got really nice upside, and hopefully he's getting out of his slump that he was in for a couple games. Then we'll look at Freddie Freeman for the Dodgers. Now, he's a good contrarian option as he's hitting the ball very well. He's also kind of not hit many home runs recently, but he does draw good potential today, and his batting average is still good. He is managed to score good fantasy points, but he did hit a home run yesterday for the first time in about 10 games. Then we're going to look at Flores for San Francisco. Now he can play first or third base. He's got really good metrics for this game. I really like his upside. He has good potential, and he's got nice home run metrics for it as well. He has been pretty good at getting good hitting games, even if he doesn't have the home runs sometimes. So when San Francisco looks decent, he's usually one of my favorite plays on the team, and that's definitely today. Then we're going to look at Connor Joe for Pittsburgh. Now he's high risk, high reward, but he's hit the ball very well recently, and so he's a good option. I do like the pitcher for Kansas City a little bit today, but if you're going to go with some Pittsburgh plays, Connor Joe is definitely one of the best ones, and he can play in the outfield as well, and he's hitting the ball very well recently. Then we'll look at second base and look at Ozzy Albies for Atlanta. Now he's been back from injury now. He took a few weeks off, but he's back now. He did not get a hit yesterday, but he definitely draws good potential again today. And assuming that he's back in full strength, then he's going to be somebody to consider. Though he's very expensive on the slate and probably a little bit harder to roster than some of the other options from Atlanta. As for Jose Altuve, he's hit the ball very well throughout the season, and he's hitting very good right now. His home run upside is a little bit more limited than some of the other guys, but he definitely draws that potential today. He managed a monster game yesterday with 42 fantasy points, as you can see, with a home run, a triple, double, and hit for the cycle. So he's definitely somebody that I would consider using again today. Mookie Betts also in play for the Dodgers. Now he has been hitting the ball extremely crazy recently, and he had a rare bad game yesterday, but he definitely draws good metrics today and has nice upside, though he is high risk, high reward due to that price, especially if he doesn't have a good big day. Again, Dario Estrada for San Francisco is also in play today. He's a little bit pricier than I like him to be, but he does draw good metrics today, and he's been hitting the ball decently well throughout the season, so I think he's a viable option. Doesn't have the most home run upside of anybody, but he's definitely capable today. Then we'll look at Julian for Minnesota. He's kind of a contrarian, cheap play today. He has been a little bit inconsistent recently, but he has managed to score, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 15 fantasy points in quite a few games this year. I do think he draws some good potential for this game, though being cheap helps if he doesn't have a huge game. But he's definitely capable of it today and has nice metrics for it. Then we'll look at Austin Riley at third base. Now he has hit the ball very well. He hit a home run yesterday. He was one of my favorite home run plays yesterday, and he paid off. The metrics are good again today. He's hitting the ball very well right now. Even with the batting average being low, he's got good potential, and so I do think he's a viable option here, though he does probably need to hit a home run to pay off. Then we'll look at Alex Bregman, who's a little bit cheaper than Riley. He's been hitting the ball very well with a 410 batting average over the last 10 games. I wish he was hitting a little more home runs, but he has managed to score fantasy points in lots of different ways. And he doesn't strike out too much, though. He did strike out 3 times yesterday. He still managed 11 fantasy points. He's getting on base and doing different things, so he's definitely a great option on the slate. Brian Hayes, if you go with a Pittsburgh stack, he would be somebody I would consider as well, as he's hitting the ball very well recently. He's not got the most home run upside, but he does draw good metrics for this game, and he's hitting the ball decently well. I think he's a great option on the slate. And then Warmo Flores can also play here at third base, and again, I like him quite a bit today. Very close to being a core play on the slate. Bobby Witt Jr. for Kansas City also in play today. He's hitting the ball very well throughout the season, and he's hitting right on average. He's got nice home run potential, though he does need to hit a home run really to pay off at this price, as his price has ballooned up very high. Gunnar Henderson has been very good recently. He's hitting the ball pretty solid with a 372 average over the last 10. Though his low games are usually pretty bad because sometimes he has bad strikeout games, but he's definitely hitting the ball very well right now. And while that's the case, he's somebody to consider, though he's a little pricey, especially pricier than I tend to like. Then we'll look at Dylan Moore for Seattle. Now, I accidentally put Oakland. Sorry about that. For Seattle, he is a great option on the slate. I do like a Seattle stack with him and Toscar and Julio Rodriguez. I think that's definitely a good stack, and he's nice and cheap. Though he is high risk, high reward, he tends to not start every game, so you want to make sure he starts. But he's hitting the ball pretty well right now, and he has good home run potential on this particular slate, and he's given some low end stolen base upside. Then we'll look at Tover for Colorado. Now, I think he's a viable option if you want to stack against Morton for Colorado as a contrarian way. He's probably my favorite Colorado bat. McMahon is probably also, or McMahon, sorry, is also in play. But I think he's a viable option today. He does tend to strike out most games, but he definitely has some potential on this particular slate, especially at home. And then Pena for Houston is a great option on this slate. He's hitting the ball very well with a 395 batting average over the last 10. The home run upside isn't quite there, but he definitely draws good metrics and has been scoring fantasy points in bunches even without the home runs. Maybe in the outfielders, we're going to look at Acuna. And First here, he had an absolutely insane day yesterday with 51 fantasy points. He had a home run, he had 5 RBIs, got a double, bunch of hits, and some stolen bases to boot. He's more than capable of doing that again today, and so he is a great option on the slate, though he is $7,000, which is really hard to roster. But if you can find a way to fit him in here, then he's definitely somebody to consider. Jordan Alvarez is in play for Houston, too. He's hit the ball very well recently. He's been a little bit streaky throughout the season, but right now he's hitting well and he's managed to score fantasy points in bunches. Though he is very expensive, he is a possibility today. Kyle Tucker, his teammate, has also been hitting the ball pretty well. He's similar priced. He hasn't hit the ball quite as good as Alvarez, but they seem to go back and forth on one guy being hot and the other one not. Right now, Alvarez is it, but Tucker could start getting going again as he has had some good games recently with 3 straight over 10 fantasy points. I do think he's viable on the slate as well. Michael Harris is also in play, though he is a little bit overpriced being this game's in Colorado. I wish he had a little bit more home run upside today, which he does have, and he also has stolen base potential, but I still think he's a little bit too pricey for what he's doing. However, he is capable of a big game here, and so he definitely falls in the category of a great option. Julio Rodriguez is a core play as well. He's hitting 600 for the last 10 games. He's had 5 home runs in that stretch. He had a big one yesterday. He's had 3 straight games with home runs. It's been a while. He's only had one game over the last like 10 where he didn't score over 10 fantasy points, and he has really good metrics for this game. Seattle looks like a great team to stack on the slate as well, just like Atlanta is. And then Toscar Hernandez, also in play for Seattle. He's hitting 432 over the last 10. He's not typically a guy that has great hitting, but he is hitting the ball very well right now, including the fact that he's had, I think, 6 multi-hit games in the last 7 games. So he is a very good option. He's also nice and cheap and gives you a lot of utility to move around. We'll look at Marcell Ozuna for Atlanta. He's also hitting the ball extremely well recently with 5 home runs over the last 10 with a 447 batting average. He even managed 12 fantasy points yesterday without a home run. And while he does tend to be streaky when it comes to needing home runs, he's very capable of that today in this matchup, and he's nice. He is a little overpriced, though, unfortunately. Andrew McCutchen, if you go with a Pittsburgh stack, is a viable option today as he's hit the ball pretty well recently with 2 home runs over the last 10. Not a huge home run threat, but he definitely hits the ball pretty well sometimes, and he's got good metrics for this game. But he's kind of a Hail Mary play on this particular slate. And then Eddie Rosario for Atlanta is kind of a sneaky play today as he's hitting the ball extremely well. He doesn't play every day, but this matchup looks really good for him, and he definitely draws some home run potential on this particular slate. He's also had 4 over the last 10 games he's played. He's not striking out much either, so he's seeing the ball very well. I also have a couple sub $3,000 players that you can choose to utilize. Jose Abreu for Houston's $2,800. He has home run potential today. Jose Caballero for Seattle at $2,500 can play second base or shortstop. Has some nice metrics for this game. For these games, Seattle's a great stack today, and they have some nice cheap options. And then Robbie Grossman at $3,000 for Texas can play in outfield. He's also a viable option on the slate as he has good metrics for this one. So, with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.